It is great to talk to you. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Yeah, likewise, Steve. I really appreciate it. I'm welcoming all of the interviews and bits and pieces we're getting offered. So it's a pleasure to actually shoot the breeze on things. So it's always good.
Well, I appreciate it. I appreciate it. Last Rite was terrifying. And
yes.
there you go. There you go. I hope that was the goal. No,
well, somewhat, imagine that if I was making a comedy.
Yeah, that's right.
You're supposed to laugh.
If you were making a comedy, you missed the mark. I don't want to upset you. No, it was really great. And I was wondering what made you want to tell this particular story.
Well, for weirdly, like I wanted to tell a story, like especially on my first debut feature film, about something that specifically resonated with myself. So to serve a story truthfully, I think you've got to sort of either come from some aspect of experience, or you have to do a bucket load of research to really immerse yourself in that world. Years ago, I used to have episodes of sleep paralysis and night terrors and things like that. And I love the supernatural. So I thought, why not combine part real life event stuff, some things I've experienced, other things I've researched, and put that in a story where it's sort of like inspired by true events, but not a story. And then just have fun with it and just sort of see where it goes. And The Last Rite ultimately was born from that.
Yeah, it was interesting. And one of the things you talk about at the end of the film, the text comes up and talks about how the phenomenon have been around for decades, left emotional scars. I was wondering, like, based on what you just said there, like, what was that process like to develop the film, and what sort of research did you actually have to do?
So with regards to the end comment, I'm really glad you mentioned that. The end comment at the end of the actual movie is really what the film is about. It's about something that leaves a mark that perforates beyond the film itself. So it enables the viewer, when they get to that part of the credit, where they can go, oh, is the story true? Is there something real about this? Is there an area I can research? Can I hit Google and research all those things? That's why I highlighted it. So part of my process to getting to that aspect was definitely the emotional scar bit. So for me, when I had, I would call it a memory relapse of emotional events that happened for me to remember all the things that I'd gone through as a child. I was 18 years old at the time. I'd had a pretty pleasant life, no problems, nothing like that. And I was watching a documentary about what was it, sleep paralysis and night terrors. It was called The Entity, but not the film The Entity. It was a documentary. And with regards to watching this, show, a weird event happened. So I had a memory relapse of things that I'd blocked out as a child. Quite a sum total of little events that literally I could remember where I was. I could remember all sorts of scenarios. It was just really surreal. And it's something that sort of stayed with me actually ever since that point in time, because, your mind protects you through blocking out aspects of severe pain or trauma, right? So for me, when I had that, it was like, okay, well, I'm not the only one for sure who's had an experience that's completely terrifying or something that's left a mark on me. So let me open up dialogue with people, find out, like, have other people experience this? You'd be so surprised actually how many people, when you open up, actually go, do you know what? Like, I've had this a few times, or I've had this, or I've had that. Now, it's not to say that, like, whoever has a sleep paralysis event is like having a demonic entity attach itself to it, and it doesn't mean that. But I think if you had like 1 out of 100 cases, there probably could be something which may not just be down to literally like it being a sleep paralysis event where you're between the realms of REM sleep and all of that stuff. So there's a lot of research that does go in to building a project like this, because you've got to serve the literature the best way possible, from the church, from the respect of, like, you know, what is a deliverance ministry versus an exorcism. You know, the Hollywood term exorcism is the thing where, you know, you swiftly learn when you get conversating with like priests and pastors and people like that, that deliverance ministry is the right way to address it. So yeah, so it was a lot of research, but, you know, just tells the story much better when you stay authentic to it.
Yeah, and you know, it's interesting. You know, you talk about the church there. We spent a lot more time with Father Roberts than I expected. You know, I expected it to be really focused on this couple. I was wondering why because he's really got his own story that's developing almost parallel to this couple. So why did you decide to tell the story this way?
Well, I believe personally that as people we talk about society now, um, we ultimately we want to get married, right? So we want to get married in the church. We want a priest to do the sermons and stuff, and to give us the, you know, the bride and all that. We want these things which come along with certain traditions, right? And I think in a lot of films, what priests or what the church tends to actually do is serve as an aid for a moment. You know, it's just there because it looks cool.
Hmm.
For me, in the story, it was very important that, you know, like, I would say, by my personal belief, I would probably be a Christian. I wasn't baptized. I haven't been to church and done all that usual stuff. But it was really important that, like, if we live in a world where it seems like evil is just triumphing everywhere, then I'm going to tell a story which is going to add more evil to it. Then I need to balance it somewhat. And it needs to have a true core voice of its own. And that was the theme of the movie. And that was the tyranny of evil triumphs when good people stand by and do nothing. Father Roberts works all on that theme. You know, he tries to figure things out. And if he can't figure it out, if he doesn't know the answer, if he's not sure, like in life, we're like that, you know, does he do the right thing, even though the right thing might be the wrong thing?
Right.
And that is really what, for me, there's a lot of little stories going on throughout the film that all connect with one another, all stemming from Lucy's effects of oppression. But it's like, you know, that affliction that she has on her, how does it affect others? And every person that comes into contact with her after the fact, are they then changed? So if you look at the story and now look at the characters that she comes into contact with, you'll start to see changes in everybody after she comes into contact with them, after being in the state of possession, let's say. So it was really, really important that the church wasn't just a piece on the board, that it served almost like a backbone. You know, we have to believe in something if we're pushed that far, right? So yeah, that was my ethos for putting that in the story.
Well, I love that. I love that. And it's so interesting. You talk, and oh, man, you said a couple of things that are really interesting to me. And one of the things, I'll focus on this one first. You know, again, going back to that use of the church, I thought there's a fascinating lack of faith within this film. At this, and I don't mean that there isn't, like you said, it's not that there isn't, because there is, but it seems like everyone who comes in contact with her, is it Lucy? Is it
Lucy? Yeah,
Lucy? Everyone comes in contact with Lucy. They're changed, but they're so apprehensive about it. It's like, oh no, that's not true. Even Father Roberts is like, well, have you tried prayer? And it's like, well, hold on, guys. Like there's a bigger reality that's going on. And I was wondering, like, you know, looking broader, why you think there is so much skepticism. I mean, we live in a culture that is generally very skeptical about these sorts of things.
I think a lot of people look at certain subjects as taboo, unfortunately. And you know, I'd like to say that actually some of that was really inspired by an actual story that happened to me. So I'm happy to share that. So like when I was going through let's say my period of time where I was questioning a lot of what I felt reality was, because I felt like I had been challenged in a way spiritually that made me really have to evaluate the position that I believed reality was versus potentially what it could be. And if this door opened, like, okay, I need to have some answers, questions, whatever, just I need something. So I went to the church, like literally went to two churches. One church was closed. The other church that I went to, you know, this is like middle of the week, you know, and there's no right or wrong time when you need to call upon, you know, if in a belief system, like, you know, you have to call upon for help whenever you feel you need it. So sure. I felt that I needed it at that time because I was questioning a lot of stuff. So I went to the church, and weirdly, I couldn't really give you a better answer than they just didn't know what to say, what to do, who to speak to. And I was like, what I'm experiencing, it doesn't sound normal. I understand. But what can I do? Like, what advice have you got? What, anything? And literally there was nothing. Literally, I walked up the path out of the church no better than when I walked down there, you know, going to talk to a complete stranger about this situation. Yeah. And I think this is what tends to happen in if we look at real life scenarios where people feel like they're being challenged spiritually. You know, if you look at what we're around or surrounded by, you know, we're surrounded in a world that's full of skepticism. People have lost faith. People only believe in the tangible, you know. And I think the moral compass of one's story has to be like, you know, I think we've got to find ourselves in ourselves first to be able to maneuver through these situations. And for me, it was quite important that that sort of made its way into the story, because, you know, if that's nobody else's story but my own, then there was definitely something that I resonate with. So it had to make it into the film somewhere. But it was more about actually with Father Roberts, he, you know, he was a tiny bit jaded of his position. He wants to do the right thing. He does the right thing as best as the right thing can be. But then he comes up against something that challenges his state of being. And at first he's very skeptical. And then slowly he starts to go, oh, do you know what? There could be more. And then he calls on to his other friend, and his friend's even in more of a darker place than he is.
Yeah, he is.
You know, because of what he's lost. But then I think that's how faith works, right? You're challenged to find yourself in a state of you either fall on your own sword or you pick your sword up and you go forward as a Trojan horse in your life and make the best of it you can. You know, so yeah, I've got a load of segues I can go on here as well, because I used to be an undertaker some years ago. So
really,
yeah.
Well, that's interesting too.
Yeah, it's very different. I've done a mixture of stuff. Yeah.
Well, that's fascinating. Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, I should ask about that. I wanted like that experience. I mean, I got to know, like, how that experience influenced the story as well, or did it?
Well, that period of my life between the ages of 17 and 18. So I was working in an undertaker's, seeing stuff that my memory can recollect as brutal, if not worse, than what you see and saw in real life, right? So I've seen a lot of things. But the biggest thing that I take away from that process was the value of life itself, and that we're not promised tomorrow, you know, and we have to make the most of each day as much as we can. That for me was the ultimate takeaway that job gave me, regardless of all of the dark stuff, because you could go very dark with it. But the key is about remembering that there, you know, there's a life and there's a light and there's an essence to each and every person that I'd come, or, you know, process that I'd come into contact with in that job. So for me, it was more about, I have to use this as an experience that enables me to have foresight in life beyond any normal situation, because most people are never put in a situation to work in that environment. So a lot of the essence from that weirdly makes its way into my work. So I work very much in like a polarity sort of sense. So between light and dark, between night and day, there's always that sort of like yin and yang effect on my work. So my ethos literally works with light loses its relevance without darkness. So we need the darkness just as much as the light. So I play a lot with that in my my work, in my writing, in my directing, cinematography, like everything. So I don't owe that job a lot, but I do owe a lot of respect to what that job gave me as a perspective, for sure.
Wow. Yeah, that's really interesting. And I mean, man, I could just keep going, Leroy. I'm like, there are so many doors we could go on. I'm running out of time here, but I really appreciate the chance. But two things. Well, first of all, I guess my last question would be this: is what scares you as you develop this? What scares you?
What scares me? Do you know? Weirdly, you know, it's not the obvious stuff that scares me, weirdly, right? So, you know, working in that environment, seeing a lot of stuff, like brutal stuff I've seen, it's not about necessarily seeing any physical harm on oneself or others. That's really quite frightening. I think it's more about ultimately would be living life with full of regret and not getting to the point in time where it's too late to make a change. Do you know what I mean? So if I hadn't have taken this risk and gone, let me make my first film. Oh, you got no money. Well, find the money. Okay, direct the film, shoot the film, edit the film, grade the film. Like, if I didn't take those risks, you know, and I just, you know, lived life and I had my little bit of money and I kept it saved up, you know, reached 70, 80, whatever years old, and then look back and gone, what if I'd have taken that risk? You know, I think that for me is the fear of not taking action, for sure.
Wow, that's great. That's great. And I'm glad you did. The film is great. It works really well on all the levels. And actually, like I said, I love how the story integrates these different conversations along the way as well. It's not just a scare fest. There's also these sort of conversations that are larger. You would have no way of knowing this. I don't even know if Laura knows this, probably, but this is my job, and I'm also a pastor.
Oh, pleasure to meet you, Father.
Oh, thank you. But I found that fascinating. I thought the film was really well executed and the story was great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, before you go, like it was, to be fair with you, it was more important that I served Father Roberts in the story than it was that I just served the story for the fact it's a possession movie. Because for me, I still wanted to sort of see that even in a role of faith, you're still challenged, but that's part of the faith. Faith has to be believed and worked for it to be, you know, like a belief, right? You have to work it. So I felt that was the thing that I needed to serve mostly with Father Roberts, is that he never quite lost sight. He just, you know, it got darker for a minute for him, but that was it.
Yeah, and his conversation with I forget his name, but the other
Ray,
former pastor. I'm like, this is fascinating. I was all in. I thought it was great. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it, Leroy.
No problem. It was an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much.
All right, anytime. Have a great day. I wish you the best.
Have a blessed day, mate.
All right,